spend more than a few minutes on any watch kind of forum like Watch Crunch, go through the comments on any video like mine or from a brand releasing a new watch, and you will see hundreds, dozens of comments talking about, I can't wait for this trend to end. And it doesn't matter what the trend is. Colourful watches, smaller sizes, bronze watches, whatever. And that's normal. Trends come and go. And after a while, trends kind of outlive their welcome. But I have a suspicion, or I'll go further. I firmly believe that there are 5 trends in the watch community right now that not only aren't going away, are actually going to be with us as long as there is a watch hobby from now on. They have become staples. After the intro, we'll get into what they are. Hi, I'm Pete McConville. Welcome to my channel where I overthink, overanalyze, and basically just geek out on watches more than is really healthy. Today, what I want to talk about are 5 things that were probably trends in watches, maybe starting 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but I think now are here to stay. They might recede a little, but they're never going to vanish again. These will always be around about the watch world. The first is a variety of watch sizes, maybe even watches getting bigger. Okay, now a lot of you are now gagging and saying, what the hell are you talking about, Pete? Watches are getting smaller. That's not really true. What is true is that watch companies are now making watches in smaller sizes. That is absolutely true. But it's not necessarily true that the larger watches are going away. So take Tudor with the Tudor Black Bay 54, which is 37 millimeters, the latest entry into these kind of smaller divers. There's a lot of hype and a lot of noise and a lot of, oh my God, look at what they've done here. But the truth is, like, Breitling was making 36 millimeter divers a decade ago. And Breitling, despite making 36 millimeter divers a decade ago, continues to make 42s, 44s, 48s. Tudor, despite making the 37 millimeter Black Bay 54, still make the 39 millimeter Black Bay 58, still make the 41 millimeter Black Bay Heritage. Whilst we are seeing some smaller sizes become available, the bigger watches aren't going anywhere. They're still being made. So that's sort of just what's happening on those watches, which I'll say not are men's watches, but are coded masculine. But if you look at what's happening to watches which are, we'll say, coded feminine, they're getting much bigger. Whereas they once might have topped out at 34 millimeters. Across the board, brands are now routinely making those watches in 36, 37, 38 millimeters. So if you weigh that up, and you'd say, if you look at masculine coded watches, the big ones are still there. They're making a few smaller ones. But if you look at what's happening over on the women's side, then they're still making the smaller ones, but they're making more and more larger watches. Across the board, the most accurate way of saying it is we are seeing a greater variety of sizes. The idea that somehow we're going to shift and everyone's going to be forced to wear like boy size watches again, it's not going to happen. There will be that idea of variety and choice and making things that people actually want to wear that look good on them and what they think they want is with us. The one size fits all approach, I think, is dead in the water, and we are never going back there. Which obviously brings us to the idea of color. A couple of years ago, watches pretty much only came in black, white, variations of the two. Every now and then something special with a blue or a salmon. And then blue became sort of expected, and we got used to that. And then green, and then that was it. The floodgates were opened. places like people like Rado and Breitling started making watches in lots of different colors. Rolex jumped on that bandwagon, followed by Omega, and that's it. Now everyone's off to the races. And that's like sizing, that's never going back. It's relatively easy to make watches in lots of different colors. It's not particularly disruptive to the way your supply chains work. It gives you more opportunity to release and change over your inventory. If you're a brand, why the hell wouldn't you do this? They've learnt that lesson. The idea of brands learning lessons, by the way, is something we'll come back to a fair bit. They've learnt that lesson. Yeah, we're never going back to just black, white, and the occasional extra. Every watch will now come in a rainbow of colors. Well, the vast majority of watches will come in a full rainbow of colors. Okay, so those are two things which I think most people are broadly in favor of. Don't think you'll find too many people arguing that that's a bad thing. Funnily enough, my next three, probably in increasing order, I suspect won't be that popular. People actually wish they would go away. Okay, I'm going to say the first one is integrated bracelet steel sports watches. They probably never completely went away, after having been introduced back in the late 60s, and then becoming sort of breaking into the zeitgeist through the Royal Oak a bit later in the early 70s. They've always been there. They've always been humming away in the background. A couple of years ago, there was a renaissance and that grew right up, and a few more brands started putting more effort into often watches that they'd been running for a little while. And then a few more brands saw that coming and then jumped on it and kept producing and kept this sort of hype train going, created a bit of a trend. And then a few more brands, and then a few more brands. That process of this sort of building trend has been running now for probably about 5 or 6 years. And I think we have now got to the point where it's actually not a trend. It's just a category. I like to think that, like back in the 1950s, when people first saw the 50 Fathoms and then saw the Zodiac Seawolf and then saw the Rolex Submariner, they started to think, this bloody trend of dive watches. There's not that many people who actually dive. When is this trend going to end? And then here we are. It's just a genre. It's just a type of watch people buy. I think we are right on the beginning of the same thing happening with integrated bracelets. What has been a kind of a boutique niche thing that came and went is now just part of the watch genre. What kind of watches do we make? We make field watches, we make divers, we make pilots' watches, we make integrated bracelet steel sports watches. It's just, whether you like it or not, you might wish that they'd go away. Don't think they will. I think they are here until the end of watch time. Okay, so the next trend that sort of popped up over the last 5 to 10 years, and I think a lot of people would love to see the back of, but sorry, it's here to stay, is bronze. I think that bronze, unlike, say, silver, which I do think will be a complete flash in the pan, won't grab much of a foothold, and will probably drift back into obscurity. I think bronze, on the other hand, is here to stay. I'm not going to say for an instant that every brand is going to run with it. I'm not going to say even that most brands will run with it. But I think there are enough people like me. I like bronze watches. There are enough people who like the look, like the feel, like the way you can kind of wear it and then reset it and then wear it and then reset it. And you can kind of play with it. That this is going to be here to stay. I suspect that from now on, there will be a significant number of companies with 1 to 2 bronze watches available pretty much at all times. Nowhere near as common as a variety of sizes or integrated bracelets or any of that other stuff. But yeah, I don't think it's going to go away. Okay, so this last trend I know is distinctly unpopular, and a lot of people are kind of waiting with bated breath for it to end. But sorry, I don't think it's going to. And that is, you can call it a number of things: higher prices, more constricted supply, increases of demand compared to supply, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to put it down to, I'm going to call the trend increased discipline from brands over production and distribution. That is what I call the sort of the meta trend here. It started during COVID, where it's kind of it was taken out of their hands. They had to shut some factories down. They had to burn through some excess stock before they could resell. Then when they reopened, there were some supply chain issues. And suddenly the brands found two things. And that was this massive inventory of unsold watches and the problem of overproduction that they'd been dealing with in 2019 and earlier, leading to mass dumping on Joma and those sorts of places, was now fixed. Much of that inventory was gone. They'd had the opportunity to restructure, break a lot of contracts, form some new ones, get rid of a lot of old staff, often supported by governments at the same time. And so as they didn't have the pressure to start manufacturing high numbers fast. So they had no choice. They couldn't go back to what they were doing pre-COVID. Then they started noticing, and this is like the number 2 punch, then they started noticing, but we're still making money hand over fist. We're still making as much. In fact, we're making more money than we were before COVID, making less watches. So then that 1-2 punch, they've said, so what you're saying is if we're disciplined about what we make, if we're disciplined about how we sell it, and we're really careful about making sure that chain always stays with a little bit of tension on board, we can make more money, have less risk, and be more secure. Yeah, they're never going to give that up. Watch companies have now started institutionalizing a lot of the things that came out of that. So the move to brand boutiques, the elimination of third-party distributors and third-party agents, the throttling back and moving to special issues, not necessarily limited editions, but special issues where you have to order in advance and it's made for you, and there's always a waiting list for these watches. Or where watches, even where brands aren't doing that, if you watch some company websites, you'll see it's not uncommon for watches to come onto the market and then be waitlisted and then come back onto the market and then be pre-order and so on. They're clearly making them only little batches and releasing them slowly. That's going nowhere. I think the brands have worked out, not only is that the key to making more money more easily, but possibly more importantly, it de-risks the situation. You're not invested as much into needing to grow, needing to sell watches. And as I said, that de-risks the whole situation. That is, in fact, probably the core business approach of Rolex for the last 40 years. They've been in a position to be able to do that for decades. That's kind of the foundation of their success now. COVID gave all the other watch companies the ability to do a great reset and kind of follow a similar business strategy. Very different watchmaking strategies, but a very similar business strategy of discipline about production, distribution, inventory control. And now that they've done that, as I said, they're never going back. And as a result, prices are never going back down to what they originally were. Okay, so they're my 5 trends that are now staples, things that aren't going away. They're just part of the watch industry, part of the watch business, part of the watch hobby from now on. I'd love to know your comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there other things that you would like to see become staples? Are there things that you would like to go away? If you've enjoyed this, I'm Pete McConville. Like, subscribe, hit the notification, the little bell icon, all that sort of stuff, and we will see each other again later. Bye.